It's like full time school. That's one of these days will be very definitely one thing. Oh, sure. Not too many. That's what one roof. Yeah, so it's a weird one. I said, look at it out. They were trying to get you straight up this morning. Oh, boy.
Oh, you're going to bring in all the non-controversial topics. Okay, well, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the Finance 101 conference. We're going to go ahead and start with some prayer. Father, we thank you so much that you are the God who has spoken. We thank you that you have given us wisdom in your word and principles by which we can handle the things that have been entrusted to us. Lord, we recognize that we are but stewards of what you have given to us. Father, we pray that you would please give us hearts to understand what's going on with our money that you've given to us. That you would let us be wise in how we allocate it to the various needs and wants in life. But Father, we pray that you would also let us know how to best glorify you as we use money. Lord, we pray for Justin that you would please give him stamina, give him strength, give him energy. Lord, we pray that we would be people who would have softened hearts. Some of us may have heard things that we don't like yesterday, and we may hear things that we naturally don't want to hear. There might be habits that need to be changed. There may be old patterns in our lives of thinking and living that need to be challenged. Lord, we pray that we would have sensitivity to those things and be willing to consider alternative ways. Lord, we pray that you please help us today and please care for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I'm going to double check the microphone this time. Working good? Awesome. Well, good morning. Again, I know there might be some newer faces here that weren't here last night. Again, my name is Justin Bennett, and thank you so much for coming. And I have really enjoyed getting to know some of you. I've been having conversations last night and this morning, and just really appreciate the warm welcome that you've given me. And again, as my wife loves to say, you can leave rural Iowa, but rural Iowa will not leave you. And so just good seeing you guys. Again, I hope you all brought your workbook, and if you haven't got one, we probably have a few extras. Make sure you get a workbook, and I want to confirm, does everyone have a working pen or something to write with? This would be a great time. And also a reminder, if you have one of these lovely devices, cell phones, if you would please put it on silent or vibrate. And again, out of courtesy and respect, if a call comes in, you got to take it. Please excuse yourself and then come back into the room. Today we're going to be using PowerPoint slides, and you'll be filling in the blanks as we go along. But before we do that, I want to just do a quick recap of last night, especially if some that may not have been here. The first thing we covered is the 7 biblical principles of personal finance. As we learned last night, there's 2,350 verses on money and possessions. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but just as a reminder, the 7 principles that kind of encapsulate those verses is 1, God owns it all. 2, saving money. 3, living on less than you make. 4, get out of debt and stay out of debt. 5, live on a budget. 6, take care of your necessities first. And 7, be generous and give. Those are the principles by which, if you follow over time, not overnight, you will begin to win with money. So in your workbook, where you're going to want to be is page 1. It will look like this. So if you're not there already, and throughout our rest of our day, we're really going to be writing in this. Feel free to take notes all over the place. This is yours to keep. And the fill in the blank lines are there to help you learn and remember. And reminder that this is a class on the basics. This is why it's called Finance 101. So if you came in here looking for the hottest stock tip, or you want to know how to do budget with an abacus and calculus, you're in the wrong room. We're going to make this very simple and easy to understand. But also, I had some great feedback last night on some questions, and if time allows today, I actually may do some additional content not in your workbook to help answer some other questions that I know are on some of your hearts and minds. With that, we will begin. We'll start filling in the blanks. And in our first module, budgeting and planning for emergencies, there's three main topics that we're going to cover in this first lesson. And the first one is the emergency fund. We're going to talk about why we need it, when we need it, how much, where we should put it, et cetera, et cetera. So our emergency fund will be the first thing we tackle today. Then we're going to tackle the budget. Everyone's favorite B word, everyone's favorite finance. We're going to talk about a budget and why it's important, how to do one. And then lastly, application. How do we apply the budget? How do we apply the emergency fund? We'll talk about that. At the end of this module, we'll take our first break of the morning. As I told you, I'd share my beautiful family. There they are. My wife, Jessica. We got 5 kids, Jacob, Jada, Julia, Joel, Josiah. Yes, we are not creative. We just stuck with the J's. What we didn't know in this picture is our daughter-in-law, Rosa, we've told her she needs a J that's silent, was expecting our first grandchild. And there she is, Autumn. She's a sweetie. We love to see her. We're so blessed that our granddaughter's in the same town we live in. So for my wife, who's grandma, if she doesn't get to see her within a week, she needs her grandbaby fix. So Autumn, we love her. She's 3 months old now and doing fantastic. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, I don't want to spend too much time on me, but I spent 10 years in the banking industry, went to a private business school, and I told you what that did. I went 6 figures in debt and couldn't even pay my house payment. So that's how well that worked. Met a guy by Dave Ramsey, as I mentioned yesterday. The only difference between Dave and I is I've got more hair and he's got more money. By following his principles, we paid off our debt, bought our house. We're working on paying it off now. We have money in savings. This stuff works. And so there we go. And there's me and Dave. If you don't believe it, that's me and the gang. That's also Dr. Henry Cloud and John Maxwell at Dave Ramsey's house. It's amazing when you pay a guy money, he'll let you in your house. And so anyway, there's one guy here that's different than the other. So I'm the taller one, but those 3, they have way more money. That's okay. All right. Well, let's get into your workbook. The next fill in the blank on the page. And this stat's a little outdated. Back in 2018, it said the average household income is $63,179. That stat I need to update. It's actually post-pandemic. The average household income, believe it or not, is $75,000. By the way, everyone over here, can you see the screen okay? I want to make sure the screen's okay that you can see here. So $75,000 is the average household income. Now, what that means is in our lifetime, if that's the average, you're going to have over $2 million flow through your hands. And there's only 4 things you can do with money. You can give, you can save, you can invest, and you can spend. Now, it's interesting when I talk about this as an average household income, I have talked in certain companies, and they'll be like, that's it? And I'll have talked to some other companies, like nonprofits, they go, I wish I made $75,000 a year. But did you know that even if you made $30,000 a year, you're going to have $1 million go through your hands in a given lifetime? And the average wage across the world is under $1 a day. So we have been given this tremendous responsibility to steward what God has given us. And what I've learned is, before we start talking about the nuts and bolts of our finances, we need a why. Why do we want to improve with our finances? Is it to be a better steward? Is it I want to retire early? Is it I want to adopt? I want to buy a home. I want to be generous. So on the bottom of your page, you should see a graphic that looks like this with various ideas of why they want to win with money. At the top of the next page, you should see 3 blank lines. Take 60 seconds and write down what would motivate you to want to improve your finances. Because when the why is strong enough, the how will happen. Write down 3 reasons why you would want to improve your finances. Go. Once you've written down your 3, circle your number 1. What is your number 1 why on why you want to improve your finances? 20 seconds. appears that most of you have gotten done writing. Now, I love workshop participation from the audience, and I have found a great way to make people talk. Chocolate. So I have candy this morning, and so who would like to share one of the reasons why they want to improve their finances? Someone give me an answer.
I grew up financially insecure, and I want to feel secure.
Want to feel secure. All right, I'm going to go a little off here. We have Snickers, Butterfinger, Payday. Butterfinger. Oh. The Payday's dirty. All right. Who else? We want to be financially secure. Can I have, Pastor Brian.
Stress-free.
Woo, stress-free. Get rid of some stress. Payday or Snickers? It's a payday. All right. Can I get one more? Woo, retire early. If you could retire today, what would you do?
Not sure yet. Oh, boy, kids, I suppose.
Good answer. All right, so we had retire early, stress-free, financially secure. Nothing wrong with those reasons, right? Unfortunately, most of us struggle to make those happen, and I think I found a video that can explain why.
I'm Stanley Johnson. I've got a great family. I've got a 4-bedroom house in a great community. Like my car? It's new. I even belong to the local golf club. How do I do it? I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I can barely pay my finance charges. Somebody help me.
I see some people smiling at that commercial. Why is that commercial so, why do we have a kind of an internal laugh with that? Anybody?
We see it all around us.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And what's interesting about this, I remember when that came out in high school in the 90s. That commercial is over 30 years old now. And isn't it interesting, it's still true today. Well, let's fill in some more blanks. I'm going to give you the sad news. The average consumer has $38,000 in debt. That's an old stat. I can tell you just by experience, I think the average consumer is closer to 80,000+ in debt. And it's becoming very common. As again, I do a lot of coaching. I've coached over 1,000 people in my life, all over the country and in the state of Iowa. 6 figures in debt is becoming normal, especially with student loans, car loans, again, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty big deal. And in fact, that was even true a decade ago. I was in Kansas City at a live event, and there was 10,000 people in the arena. And the financial expert in the room said, hey, everyone text in how much debt you have, not counting the house. And this was in 2012, and it was 80 to 90,000 in Kansas City. 77% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Now, if you Google paycheck to paycheck stats, you'll see anywhere between 60 and 80, and which one's right, I don't know. Here's my definition of paycheck to paycheck. If you had one paycheck, let's say you get paid twice a month, and one paycheck was taken away from you, could you still pay your bills? And if the answer is no, you're living paycheck to paycheck. Now, often when we say paycheck to paycheck, what I hear some people think of is that's lower income or whatever. The sad reality is the more money you make, the better chance you're paycheck to paycheck. In fact, it's not uncommon. I'll meet with people who make 6 figures of income and have no money in savings, but a lot of debt. 92% of us have lost sleep at some point for finances. We either lost sleep due to, am I going to have enough to retire? Am I going to be able to help my kids? Or the light's going to get cut off next week. So we've lost sleep at some time. And one of the biggest reasons why I do this is money fights is a leading cause of divorce. And what we have found is when we can get our money right in our marriage, how much that improves. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're going, now, wait a minute. Brian said we're getting a motivational speech about personal finance and those stats. I'm not feeling real motivated right now. But that's the reality of where most people are with their finances. And I for sure used to be in that category. Well, what I have discovered in life, and I think you guys probably would agree, if I want to win at something, find winners, mimic what they're doing, and there's a pretty good chance I get to win. And I mentioned I follow Dave Ramsey, but I don't just follow him. Anyone here ever read the book, The Millionaire Next Door? It's a great book. If you've never read it, I recommend it, even though it was in the 80s. Well, his follow-up book called The Millionaire Mind, really great book. I'm going to reference this book throughout our time. It's a little bit of a longer read. But in the book, it talked about there's 30 plus categories of these successful, wealthy people. Good news for people like me, GPA wasn't the top 10, so I have a chance, yes. But the top two that tied for first in terms of character qualities to build wealth, one was integrity, believe it or not, and the second one was discipline. Discipline. I don't like discipline, do you? But I like the results I get when I'm disciplined, right? And so years ago, my wife and I did our first mini triathlon. I'm not one that likes to run. I just like challenges. And so here we are, my wife and I and another couple, we're doing a mini triathlon. And just in case you don't know what that is, you run a long ways, you bike a long ways, and you swim a long ways. And it was 11-week training to go from couch to race. The first few weeks, I absolutely couldn't stand it. I hated running. I didn't want to do it. In fact, if my wife and our friends weren't joining, I probably would have quit, if I'm honest. But I'll never forget about week 6. I was getting done with work that day, and it was time to go do a 6-mile run. And I remember going, I'm actually looking forward to this because I feel better. I have more energy. I'm breathing better. And the same is true with finances. When you first jump into your finances, especially if it's been a while or you've never done it, it may not be the most fun thing you've ever done. But do you know what I hear from all of my clients? I shouldn't say all, but almost all my clients after 15 years of coaching, within a few months of doing a budget, I often hear this. Why didn't I do this sooner? This wasn't so bad after all. I got a client right now in Florida, single lady. She's in her 60s, going to retire in a couple years. And every month she's like, Justin, oh my gosh, this is so painfully simple. Why didn't, ugh. And so it is worth getting on the discipline train. Now, be careful though. The moment you start wanting to work on your finances, you may get a call that sounds like this if you're married from your spouse. Hello? Yep. The car broke down again? Oh man. $1,000 credit card. I thought we weren't going to use a credit card anymore. What are we doing? Oh my gosh. Have anyone ever made or received a phone call like that where things aren't quite going your way? Well, turn your page in your workbook because we're going to jump into the first part, which is the emergency fund. We need an emergency fund, and the reason why, or what we do, is you set aside money for unexpected events. Unexpected events. Those could be things like car repairs, or it could be things like saving money for maybe you lose a job or medical bills, and those different things. We call them budget busters. So what I want you guys to do is take 60 seconds and write down in your workbook what's been a budget buster you've been through in the last 6 months. Now, Christmas doesn't count. That we know when that's coming, right? So we're talking about things like you had a car breakdown, or the furnace of the heater went out. Take 60 seconds and write down what were some budget busters you had. Go. Looks like most people have some answers down. If I could get some different people to share this time, what are some budget busters that you've been through in the last 6 months or so? Car repairs. What broke down?
Our U-car
Oh boy.
and
Electrical issues. And you know what's a pain about electrical issues, right? Sometimes you're like fishing around trying to find the problem, and that could even be more costly. Bummer. Other budget busters.
Having kids on the other coast.
Yes, those.
Traveling and bringing them back as well. That's fantastic.
There you go. Any more?
after 50 years, we haven't replaced all the windows.
Sounds like you got your money's worth at least, though, right? Thank you. I did this the other day at a small university, and I was doing it in front of the faculty and staff. And someone in the front row said, yeah, the night before we went to the movies, and as my husband was eating his popcorn, one of his teeth fell into the popcorn. What? So you just never know what things can happen. And so we need some money to set aside for emergencies when life happens, because it's just going to happen, right? And we recommend, as we said yesterday, your starter emergency fund is $1,000. Now, do not get comfortable with $1,000, as we talked about yesterday. That's just to get us started. We eventually want to get you to 3 to 6 months of expenses, and 64% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings. And I think I mentioned yesterday, I saw another stat just recently. It was 69% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings. So we want to get that very first thing. And we talked about the baby steps yesterday, but just a quick review of the baby steps. So what we're talking about with emergency fund, that's your first baby step, the Dave Ramsey steps. Get your $1,000 as fast as possible. Should take a month or 2, 3 max. Number 2, the debt snowball. I'm going to go in detail with that at our last session today. Baby step 3 is 3 to 6 months of expenses. And again, we talked about that last night as your living expenses. So this is just your basics that you're covering for 3 to 6 months. We get that taken care of. We're going to invest 15% of our income in retirement. Step 5 is we're going to help our kids with those new expenses as they're becoming adults. Baby step 6, pay off the house early. And baby step 7, build wealth and give. At the bottom of page 6, let's talk about what an emergency fund is first not. An emergency fund is not a vacation fund. Please go on vacation. You should. I took my first ever 3-week vacation this month. It was very good. And all I did was be a bump on a log at home just to take a break. It was worth it. We all need rest and respite. I want you to take a vacation, but don't use your emergency fund for it. It's not an eating out fund. It's not I'm too tired to cook, let's go out to eat tonight fund. In your budget, which we'll talk about in a minute, you should have some money set aside for eating out, but do not use the emergency fund. And it's not pad in your checking account. Again, you should have some pad in your checking account, but none of these are your emergency fund. Top of the next page, what is an emergency fund? Well, your emergency fund first should be put in a separate account. And we'll talk about that in our second course, Relationships and Money. We'll talk about what bank accounts you should have. But with your emergency fund, you want that completely separate. And the only thing you use it for is emergencies. Keep it completely separate, because if you don't, like my friend Chris says, you'll get robbed by the marts. Walmart and Kmart. Or at least Walmart. I don't even know if Kmart's around anymore. What will happen is you're going to go to the store and to Walmart and you're going to get some groceries and you're going to see a big screen on sale before the football season. Emergency, I need a big screen TV. No. So keep your emergency fund separate from all other bank accounts. Number 2, your emergency fund is protection. It gives you a little bit of pad between you and life. So whether you're trying to pay off some debt, or maybe you get out of debt, you have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. When we first got out of debt. Finally, we got the 6 figures in debt paid off. And I'm not kidding, in 90 days, both cars died. My wife got hit from behind, and another one, the engine blew up. But we had an emergency fund. We were to go buy some cars and refill it and get back up again. And then lastly, the emergency fund is for emergencies only. I want you to pretend like your emergency fund is in the plexiglass with like the fire extinguisher. You have to kind of bust it to get in there. You're not going into the emergency fund unless you actually need it. In fact, I know some people with their emergency fund, what they do is they actually put it at a separate bank from their primary checking as an extra pad not to touch it. Because what's cool about an emergency fund, you almost forget you have it once it's there, and then you go, wait, when something comes up, you just pull the emergency fund. A couple things about an emergency fund I'm often asked is, where should I put it? Best places to put it are either in a money market or a high yield account where you can at least get some interest. You're not going to get a ton. Right now, a lot of banks are offering about 4% on those if you can do that. But we're not worried about interest rates on the emergency fund because we're more worried about it protecting us and having liquid money available when something comes up. So I wouldn't recommend the stock market for your emergency fund. But I would say a separate account in money market or a high yield account, make sure you talk to your bank. They'll have bank limits that you can do and those kind of things. We recommend those things. If you use your emergency fund, let's say you're on baby step one, $1,000 cash in the bank, and let's pretend a $500 car repair comes up, what do? Stop everything you're doing. I mean, pay your bills, obviously, but refund that emergency fund as fast as you can, and then get back on it. So if you use it, put money back in as fast as you possibly can, because it's just nice having that protection, that peace of mind, that security that Terry was talking about earlier. As I mentioned, throughout our day, I'm going to hit pause to do Q&A. Anytime you guys have a question specifically to what we're talking about, I want to hear them. So in the emergency fund category, are there any questions that you would like answered that maybe haven't been answered yet for emergency fund? Going once?
Can you explain maybe the anomaly with our family? It seemed like as we were fighting like ourselves to get that emergency fund, micro emergencies kept happening. How do you not get discouraged?
Great question. There's a great book. I brought it, but I didn't put it here on my table. There's a great book called The Gap and the Gain. And it's a great book on mindset, which I'd recommend reading by a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan, though. Supposed world's leading strategic coach. I don't know if that's true or not, but his books are awesome. Anyway, in The Gap and the Gain, which is a more general topic, then I'll get specific to that. It talks about the mindset of a gap personality versus a gain. And we're all taught to begin with the end in mind. And so if you have an end goal that you're trying to reach, and you started here and you're here, if you only visualize how far you have to go, you're going to have negative emotions like, man, I'm stressed, this ain't working, why are we doing this, blah, 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 blah. But a gain mindset says, look how far we've come. You spend more time measuring where I used to be and where I am now versus measuring how far we have to go. Now, we still want to measure how far we have to go, but I mean, Brian, I remember we were getting out of debt like you, Gazelle Intense. I'll never forget, we had cell phone debt, which I don't recommend at all because we bought into that, and we got cell phone debt. We just paid it off. We're like, yes, and then wham, a new monthly expense came up. I'm like, really? And I mean, it just happened over and over again. Or my wife, when she wasn't taking care of our kids, she was a homeschool mom and a stay-at-home mom, but she also on the side painted murals back in the day. And every once in a while, we would get a mural request. I remember one time she got like a $3,000 or $4,000 mural. We're like, oh my gosh, yes, we could finally put some money to debt. Car broke down and a couple other things. I'm like, come on. So how do you stay motivated? Well, one of the things I do with my clients when I meet with them over a 6-month period of time is we always start our session with victories and successes. What went well? And I'll have clients tell me nothing. Well, really? And often I can get them to cough up 5 to 10 victories. They may not have been the victories that they wanted, but I'll never forget, and this is in my book coming out in January, I had a couple that came in my office. I mean, they had a debt. If I printed it off, it was that long, just a list of debt they had. And I'll never forget, the first month, they had 2 different appliances go out. Second month, the car broke down. The third month, took their kid to the dentist and said, yeah, she needs braces. And I was worried they were going to lose hope because they're just getting in here. And I asked them, I said, how are you doing? And the husband goes, I'm actually feeling pretty good right now because if this would have been a year ago, we would have been sunk. He had the right idea of seeing, hey, yes, we're not getting ahead on our goals, but look where we are and where we could have been if we weren't doing that. The other thing I recommend, my book talks about this in detail, is having accountability. We'll talk more about that in the relationships and money. But whether single or married, don't go in alone. I know personal finances is taboo. It's supposed to be all personal. Yes, I don't recommend putting your finances on social media. That's not encouraged. But if you're married, maybe find another couple or two. If you're single, find some other people. We'll talk about that. My wife and I, we meet with 2 other couples every 6 weeks. And they can say just as much into our finances as we can speak into them, both our personal and business finances. And it's been really amazing, the conversations we've had. And when almost always one of us is in a funk, and the other ones go, but yeah, and speak truth and speak wisdom into our lives. So again, it doesn't mean that on Sunday, Pastor Brian's going to say, okay, everyone put your spreadsheet on. No, we're not doing that. But you might find some people to help encourage you. And if you're nervous about that, this is not to sell my services, hire a coach. Because a number of times I've had people come to me going, I love being able to go to you when I'm struggling, but I also love being able to go to someone that I can share my successes with because I can't really share it with anybody else. Other questions? An emergency fund. Well, one question might be, great, well, Justin, where are we going to get some of the saved money? Budget. Budget. Budget is one of those words, for whatever reason, it makes you think I'd rather go see the dentist than, or maybe it's like the dentist. And if you're a dentist in here, I'm not trying to pick on you, I like dentists. But the thing about a budget is this, it will give you peace of mind and control. We're going to go into that in a minute, but I want to talk a story quick. One of my current clients, who when I first met with his husband and wife, just happened, I met with them in a coffee shop, and they wanted help getting out of debt. And I happened to mention the word budget, and the wife looked at me very sternly and said, never use the word budget in my presence again. Okay, I'm thinking you're looking at hiring me. I'm kind of confused. A few months later, she's like, I am so sorry. I feel so embarrassed. I love my budget. Because one of the things in the budget that we put in there is a garden fund. She loves to garden. She's got a green thumb, and that just brings her joy and happiness when she's not at work, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know those baby steps we talked about? They're on baby step 7 right now. They have house paid off, everything. Do you guys remember this year we only had one major snowstorm, and then right after it was like negative a gazillion degrees? That only Midwesterners understand what this is like, right? She came into online rather, and she was just having a bad day. Again, baby step 7, everything paid off, emergency fund, all this kind of stuff. And she was just singing the blues just about how days just kind of not have been a good day. And I said, but Jeannie, remember what's in your budget? She's like, no, your garden fund. Don't you have money in your garden fund? And as soon as I talk about garden, this same woman who don't mention budget again, I was able to turn her Midwest Iowa gloomy day and mention the word budget and was all smiles. So we want to get to doing a budget. Now, some of you may have tried a budget before and it looked like that. And here's the reason why for most people. When most people go, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do a budget, we start tracking our expenses, and you should. If you become one of my clients, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do for the next 30 days is track every penny that goes out the door for no matter what you spend it on. But that's not budgeting. That's accounting. So let's pretend, I don't know if this is 260, 170, I can't remember what road I'm on here, but let's pretend I'm going this way, and I wouldn't go 70 on a rock road. I'm used to saying 70, but this is a rock road, so I probably shouldn't do 70. But let's pretend I'm going 40 miles an hour on this rock road, but I'm looking this way as I'm driving. What's going to happen in about 5 seconds? Probably hit a deer while I'm going into the ditch, right? might hit 2 deer, right? I'm not against tracking. We should do some tracking, but that's not budgeting. Budgeting, fill in your blanks, is proactive, not reactive. So when you're budgeting, you're looking ahead, not behind. And when you do a budget properly, it feels like you get a raise. A study just came out last year. The average household that does not budget is overspending by at least almost $400 a month. And what's been interesting is every single person I've said that to so far, not one exception, they'll say something like, at least. That's almost $5,000 a year. So do you realize by getting on a budget, you're going to find $5,000 a year going to you to do whatever God is asking you to steward that money with? There's lots of budgeting principles and ideas out there. I'm a fan of what's called the zero-based budget approach, where you take your take-home pay minus your expenses for the month equals 0. Now, when people hear that, one misunderstanding I keep hearing is they think that means their bank account should be at 0. No, please not. Have some pad, have some cushion. Not too much if you're in debt. Remember we talked about that yesterday. Have some pad, but not enough. But we're talking about your budget going to 0. This is the only time I'm going to have you do this because I used to do it somewhere else. I'm going to ask you to kind of skip ahead in your workbook. I don't know if it's purple, pink, magenta. I don't know. My kids and wife make fun of me. I don't know my colors very well. I like spreadsheets. You want to get to this right here where it says 4 keys of budgeting. And then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program here. Give everyone a minute to get there. And I'm going to walk through what I call the 4 keys of budgeting. But before I do that, there's an overarching principle, and you're going to want to write this down somewhere in your notes. Budgeting needs to be a way of life for the rest of your life. I'm going to say that again. Budgeting needs to be a way of life for the rest of your life. And it's not meant to be some medieval torture. Again, a lot of my clients talk about this when they get on a budget, how they go, wow, I wish I wouldn't have done it before. I wish I would have started sooner. But here's one thing I see what happens. As soon as you start budgeting, you start getting some money. And it feels kind of nice. The wolf starts to get a little away from the door. And then the budget all of a sudden becomes a set it and forget it. Do not do that. A budget is active. In fact, you might have heard the word currency because money flows. So you should always be doing a budget. Even if today you woke up and you had $1 million in the bank and no debt, still be doing a budget every month, which leads us to our first key, update your budget. We'll talk about different budgeting tools in a little bit. But when we talk about updating your budget, what we're saying there at a minimum is a new budget should be done every month. Again, to quote my mentor from afar, Dave Ramsey, he says a budget's on paper, on purpose, or maybe an app on purpose before the month begins. So we're almost to August 1. Before August 1, you're going to want to create an August budget. Before September, you're going to want to create a September's budget. Now, why would we do that? There's never going to be 2 budgets the same. Unless you're on a really fixed income, and I'm talking 4 bills max, no 2 budgets will look. July will not look like August, because you know what happens in August, right? State fair. Well, you're not budgeting for the state fair in May, unless you've got a lot of expenses that you're trying to save up for, right? And so when September comes, you shouldn't have the state fair on your budget. When you think about food, we don't spend the same on food every month. Think about November. If you don't change your grocery budget on food and you're hosting Thanksgiving, you're going to be hosting with ramen noodles and not turkey. So we need to change our budget. Now, there's 2 parts to the budget. There's your income and your expenses. How many of you get paid and every paycheck's different? Either you're a wage earner or you're part commission. Does anyone here does your income fluctuate? Anyone have that? A couple people do. Okay. I often hear from people when their income fluctuates, well, I can't do a budget. My income changes. How can you budget when your income changes? And then the utilities are always different. You have to budget more than everybody else has to budget. So here's what you do to make it simple. When I talk to most people, with rare exception, they know by payday a rough idea. They may be off a little, but they've worked at their job long enough. This is a $1,000 paycheck, or this is a $2,000 paycheck. They may be off by some dollars, but they're close. So what you do is you do the budget where you put in your best projected guess. And then on payday, when you get your paycheck, before you do anything with the money, you go back to the budget and you make some changes. Take 60 seconds. So if my wage is steady, I pay a salary to myself, I don't have this problem. But if I did, let's pretend I projected $1,500 was my paycheck for that paycheck. I'll put that in there. I will do my budgeting techniques I'll teach you in a minute. And let's pretend that I get my actual paycheck. I thought I was going to be $1,500 and it was $1,600. Woohoo! Extra $100. Yes. What I'm going to do then is I am going to then go to my budget, raise my budget from $1,500 to $1,600, and then budget the additional $100. Reverse is true. If I said $1,500 was my check, I get it and it was $1,400. I'm going to go back to my budget and go, well, it's $1,400, and go, now what am I reducing by $100? So be sure to do that. You always want to do a budget on that way. But also expenses change, right? Like, so for us, for instance, we end up spending more money on fuel in the summer because we're traveling all over the place and doing different things than I might say in February when it's snowy and there's only 28 days. So you want to change your budget along the way. So if our first key is updating it, the second key is the balanced budget approach, which is that zero-based budget. That's your income minus expenses equals zero. Now, here's the fact to know about budgeting. Whenever you do a brand new budget, it will not balance your first pass. So if you put all your income in, you put all your expenses in, and it doesn't balance, you didn't fail if it didn't say zero, because it won't. But you've got two choices. If you've got extra money left over, that's a good thing. But put it to the baby step you're on. Because if you have $500 left over in your budget and you don't give it a name, you're going to spend $1,000 wondering where $500 went. So make sure if you got extra money, just give it an assignment. If you rather put it on eating out or giving or whatever, that's fine. But extra money, give it a name. If you're short or not in Congress, you have to go back to your budget and reduce and eliminate expenses. So if the budget says, oh man, we're $300 short this month. Okay, we're going to have to make some grown-up decisions here and going, well, what are we not doing? Because remember one of the principles? Live on less than you make. And guys, there's times we have to make hard decisions too and going, yeah, we do X and it's just 1 month. We'll go back into it. So you update it, you balance it. The second or the third key is discussing it. And that looks different whether you're single or married. Let's talk about this if you're married. If you're married, I do not recommend going home, sitting on the kitchen table, going line by line to create the budget. You'll need to add marriage counseling as a line item to your budget. However, that doesn't mean you give it to one spouse and the other spouse goes away. What I have found that works the best for most couples, and it's what we practice, is one of you already kind of likes the numbers and make sure the bills are paid on time. You're the one that's going to be doing the updating and the balancing. But that doesn't make you king or queen of the hill. So if we were married, we're not, because Kurt could put me in a pretzel in about 2 minutes if I even tried something like that. But if we were married and she did the budget, I couldn't go, looks good, you got it, you just take care of it. I've never met a couple that went well. In fact, I'll share a story later that went quite the opposite. So in our house, I bet you're going to be shocked. I'm the one that updates and balances it. Now, if I died today on the way home, my wife can do this, by the way. Fully confident in her ability to up. In fact, before we got married, even in the early 2000s, some of you guys may remember that old green ledger paper. That's how she did her budget, the old-fashioned the accounting level stuff. But anyway, we do that. And then at least once a month, we go through the budget together to make any changes. And so she needs to go through and go, hey, we need more in clothes this month because we don't have enough to save back for clothes. Or, hey, you didn't put in there, you forgot that on this week we're going to Aunt Matilda's. We don't have an Aunt Matilda, but whatever. We've got things going on. If you have not been budgeting for a while, I'm going to encourage this, to meet weekly for at least 2 or 3 months for just 15, 20 minutes. It will change your marriage. It will change your life. I have yet to have a couple who will tell me and look me in the eye and go, you know what, because of meeting weekly, our marriage went worse. It actually improves. And then what's weird is as you talk more about finances, you begin to start talking about other things. My wife and I, one of the things we used to do when our kids were rural, we had all 5 kids home, they're all busy. We took 3 hours once a week just to get our calendars in order and our money in order. And because there's just a lot going on. You'll find other reasons why to meet. And if you were my client, I would tell you to pull out your phones right now and go, okay, we're going to pick, is it Sunday after church? Is it Friday night at 5? Is it Wednesday at lunch? But meet weekly to discuss the budget. Now, if you want to make a change in the budget, that's perfectly fine, but both of you need to be in agreement. So if I want to change our budget by $200, I'm going to go to my wife. Hey, I'm thinking about $200 versus putting it in this line item. Let's move it over here so we can be unified. We can be together. Now, if you're single, I'm going to encourage you, especially to have someone hold you accountable. And we're going to talk about more relationships and money. What does accountability look like? What's a good accountability partner? What's a bad accountability partner look like? And I'll even recommend, by the way, if you're married, as I said earlier, get another couple or 2 in your life. I think accountability works in all areas that way. I'll never forget, I was doing this actual class somewhere, and I had one of the attendees become a client, and she was single, and I told her to get an accountability partner. Well, she was an overachiever. She got 3. And the next month, she shared with me the power of the accountability partner. She went to work, and that day, her back was hurting. Now, we're not talking like medically bad back, just a sore back. We all have those, right? And she was going to go to the massage therapist. But she's like, wait a minute, I should probably see my accountability partner first. And so she went to one of her accountability partners, and she said what was going on. And all the accountability partner had to do was, is that in the budget? No. Maybe you should just take a couple Advil. And she's like, Justin, if I didn't ask that question and she just didn't give me that small nudge, I would overspend and overdrawn my checking account. That's the power of what an accountability partner can do, and we'll share more stories on that. So we're going to update the budget at minimum once a month. We're going to balance it zero-based budget. We're going to discuss it. The last key is to live on the budget. The first 90 days are the most critical because that's where you're going to build the habits to get going with this. But it will actually take you about a year for it to really get into your ecosystem. Because every month is going to have what I call, oops, I forgot. Oops, I forgot we got school registration and back to school cost. September, oops, I forgot we have the this, that, or the other thing, and we got homecoming if you got kids, and there's expenses with that. Every month is going to have a little bit of something different. But after about 90 days, you begin to get in a groove. And do not be surprised if the first month you have 5, 10, 12 corrections you've got to make. I didn't think about that. I forgot I had this. I thought my pay. I am surprised at the number of people, I'm not picking on anybody if this is you, that don't know what their actual paychecks are. They've never looked at their pay stub. And so, I make $1,500, and they look up $1,200. They have no idea other deductions were coming out. They just were coming out. And so the first budget may be a little bit of a train wreck. That didn't mean you failed. You're just getting started. And being that I'm in rural Iowa, I love my next question. How many of you know in here how to drive a stick shift automobile? I'm hoping a lot of hands go up here. Do you remember the first time that you drove a stick shift? Are you glad that never made YouTube? My first car was a 1994 Eagle Talon 4-speed 5-cylinder engine. Or wait, 4-cylinder 5-speed. I said that in reverse. Anyway, never heard of a 5-cylinder engine. If anyone find one of those, let me know. Anyway, I was getting where I was getting comfortable. My dad was a truck driver, and he also grew up as a farmer, so he had that whole thing figured out. And I'm learning how to drive this stick, and I'm feeling pretty confident. We're going 70 miles an hour down the road, and there's a stop sign. Now, for those of you that maybe have never shifted a gear before, when you're in 5th gear slowing down, the correct answer is you go to 4th. But I like to be efficient. So at 70 miles an hour, I went from 5th to 2nd. I think some of you know what just occurred. My car made a loud noise, and I didn't know if I was going to live to tell about it. Right behind it was my dad, who made a loud noise, and I didn't know if I was going to live to tell about it. But I didn't stop driving because I about blew the transmission out of my car. Thankfully, I didn't. I kept learning how to drive it. I can drive a stick shift like now, just like that. But I about blew up my car. I didn't quit. My father-in-law has a nice 1984 Camaro. 350, 300, or 305 with a 350 horsepower. Got more torque than the Porsche. You can scratch it in all 5 gears. I might have done that once. I would have not had the blessing of driving this fun car had I gave up because I about blew up mine. So keep going with your budget is the point, even if the first budget or two doesn't go the way you want it. Those are the 4 keys to budgeting. Now, go back to the yellow or gold or harvest gold, whatever color this is. Go back to here. Should be page 8 and 9 in the budgeting and planning for emergency section. And you're going to see a sample budget. And at the bottom of the page, you're going to see a graphic that looks like this. The first thing you do when you do a budget is you're going to put down all of your income. This is your take-home pay after taxes, after deductions, what actually hits the bank account. So you're going to put a list of all of those. And again, if you're not sure, make an estimated guess, and then go back and change it once you know it. And then on the top of the next page, you're going to put a list of expenses. Now, if you're like me, there's a lot more expenses than this, and I need to update this graphic because $500 for groceries, that doesn't happen anymore, at least at my house. And again, the income minus expenses equals 0. Now, everyone turn to here, where it should look like a budget form. Now, after we do this exercise, we'll talk about different budgeting things like apps and whatever, but we're going to go old school. And this is where you get to have some fun. In a moment, not right now, but in a moment, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to get your hands dirty and actually do a budget. Now, if you're already doing a budget, you're going to be just flying through. For others, you're going to be making guesses, and that's okay. But I want you to take 15 minutes, and I'll be walking around. You can raise your hand, and I'll come answer questions. And I want you to begin filling in these blanks. And you will find, because when I created this, there was no such thing as a subscription. So Netflix is not on here. I saw this, I was looking at this, DVD rentals. Okay, I'm going to have to update this. No one rents DVDs I'm aware of anymore. But anyway, just if you don't see Amazon on here, scratch out, put it in there. The other thing is this. How many of you maybe pay your insurance annually or every 6 months to try to get that discount, right? Or you maybe have to pay your car tags annually, or Christmas comes every year. Any expense that's not monthly, turn it into a monthly expense. So for instance, if you have Christmas and you spend $600, put $50 a month. If you have car insurance and every 6 months it's $600, divide that by 6, $100 a month. Just make everything in here a monthly expense. At the bottom of page 11, you'll see total bottom line, total income, total expenses, and the difference. Some of you will get that far, some won't, and if you don't, that's okay. If you get to the bottom and it's not 0, do not put your pen down. You're not done. Now you got to go back to the budget and go, okay, it says I've got $600 left over. Where am I going to put it? Or, I got 700 less. I'm 700 in the red. This ain't good. Start thinking about ways that you would cut your expenses. Before we do this exercise, any questions about the exercise? Everyone got a workbook? Are we ready to go? 15 minutes? We'll have some lovely music in the background for you. Go. And just a reminder, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll come by and answer that for you.
want a renaissance to shine a light with a change we want. Set things right. We've been waiting so long. I wanna wake you in my heart. Hear the angels sing. Shine spark. We've been sleeping in so long. But I believe in truth. Guess I'm not so unlike you. 'Cause there's a sound like music in you, trying to get out. So let it sing through everything that is you. I want a miracle of my own. I've been hiding here alone so long, but I believe it's true that I'm not so unlike you. 'Cause there's a sound like music in you, trying to get out. So let it sing through everything that is you now. Oh, we are many voices ringing in the dark. Only through our choices can freedom carry on. We are many voices singing hope along with our very own song.
Just want you guys to know we are halfway through our 15 minutes. Keep going. And again, if you have questions, let me know.
I want a renaissance. We've been sleeping in the dark too long.
Raindrops fall and the sun will shine. It's a saving grace for a time. Come on.
2-minute warning here, 2 minutes to go. All right. Again, some of you might have been able to complete the exercise. If you didn't, that's fine. My hope is this was, especially if this is your first time doing it, maybe some eye-opening revelations. And so don't have to share, but I'm curious, any revelations or any ahas as you did that exercise that you're willing to share? Don't have to, but curious if there was any.
It sucks.
It sucks. Appreciate the honesty. Love it.
Well, it's a combination of guilt and woe and having to adult.
Adulting, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
As I was skimming through the list of things here, there's some obvious items that, boy, I never really thought about. Like car repairs. I never really thought about setting money aside for car repairs. I just, when something comes up, you take care of it, or house repairs or something like that. I've never planned for that before. I just take care of it when it comes up. And just little things that I ought to be planning for that I haven't been out of the expenses columns.
That's good. And what can really be a nail biter is when several of those come at the same time, because things come in threes, right? And so it's like you got car repair, then a home repair. I'll never forget one of the worst days financially in my life. It was the worst day in business where I added up what I made for the month. And I made more than that part-time at 14. I'm a single income with 7 mouths to feed. That was the first bad revelation. The second thing that happened was the air conditioner went out that day. And then I came home and a windstorm happened and a tree went on my roof. I'm at 10 o'clock at night going, well, I'm toast. But by God's grace, thankfully the roof went a few bad shingles and the neighbor came over with a chainsaw and we at least got rid of that problem. So anyway, well, often revelations I hear is I spend too much. I was doing this very class as a 4-week class at our church. And after the first week, a guy came up to me and he goes, I'm really embarrassed. I go, why? I eat out too much. Now, I've seen a lot at this point, so nothing really phases me anymore. And I'm like, well, how much were you spending? We spent $300. I go, on eating out? Yeah, in a week. He's like, that can't keep happening. I go, good, you got your eyes open, that's good. It's not uncommon to hear, it says I have extra, where is it? I'll never forget, right after doing this very workshop at a company, guy comes up to me afterwards and he goes, I don't really like you and Dave Ramsey. I go, well, thanks for coming today. How can I help? Well, whenever I do my budget every month, it says I have $600 a month left over, but I never see it. I said, you and your wife should sign up for coaching. And they did. Now, my second question I asked a coaching client is this: on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is hopeless and 10 is peaceful, where do you emotionally rank right now with your finances? And they both said 3. But when the wife said 3, tears began to go down her face. She says, Justin, I'm on my online banking every day, multiple times a day, making sure I'm not overdrafting. I'm moving money around. Listen, we'll do anything within legal, moral bounds. Get us out of here. Well, remember how they said they were 600 positive every month? When I did their budget, they were 500 in the red for what you just said. Because when we added in Christmas, car registration, school supplies, clothing, all those things, it adds up. Well, thankfully, the story didn't end there. In 6 months, not only did they get their budget right side up, they paid off thousands of dollars in debt, cash flowed over $3,000 in unplanned expenses. And when I asked them on a scale of 1 to 10, where would they rank their emotions 6 months later, they both said 9. What was really cool was the wife said, Justin, do you remember when we first started working with you, I got paid every week? I go, yep. And I go, now I get paid bi-weekly. And I'm like, okay, I'm not understanding the connection. I went a week without pay. And if you told me I could have went a week without pay and not worried, I would have said, what are you smoking and would you share some, please? But because of budgeting and having things under control and living on less than we make and doing the things that you're learning today and what they learned then, they were to get their life back on track. Another one I hear is I've never really thought of it like this before. Had another client from rural Iowa who I came to see. And when they came to me because they had borrowed money from mom and dad, and mom and dad's like, okay, you need to pay up. We have let you kind of ride this long enough. It's time to pay. And the reason why they were bringing it to them is because they could tell they weren't doing real well with money, and if they didn't ask for the money, they're probably never going to get it. And so this couple came to me, and I did their budget, and they were over $2,500 a month in the red. Now, I'm a whiz at making budget cuts. And I got it down to about $1,800 in the red. The husband's face turned red. And the wife began to cry. And I happen to know these people. Justin, what do we do? We've cut every expense we can cut, and we don't want to file bankruptcy. And I said, guys, I'm going to encourage you to do something. And I know you're in rural Iowa. There's not a lot of places to work. But one of you needs to pick up like 3 part-time jobs. And when the other one's home, you're selling everything but the kitchen sink on Marketplace. I'll never forget they left the office that I had in that day, kind of head down, but that was the only answer that was there. I was a little nervous, if I'll be honest with you, the next month what I would hear. And they came in, and I knew rural Iowa, you don't exactly find pizza delivery. Where they lived, you had to drive 2 hours to find a pizza delivery joint that would work as an extra job. So I knew it was going to be hard. And I'll never forget when they came in that first follow-up session, the wife goes, I got 3 jobs. Husband's like, I'm selling everything. He was selling his tractor that he didn't really use. It was just kind of a toy thing. And he was selling everything inside. And they went from being $2,500 in the red to $700 in the black. And they paid off enough debt in the first 6 months. Their parents, who were begging for the money, said, you know what, pay us last. You're doing it. But it started with doing a budget. And I get different things. Sometimes people do a budget and go, wow, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I get others that go, yep, that was as bad as I thought. And I get others going, oh, crap. No matter what, you've got to look in the mirror. It is hard, but worth it. That adulting is hard, but it is worth it. Now, tactically speaking, what do we use? How do you budget? Well, there's really 3 ways you can budget. You can do old-fashioned pencil and paper, which is just fine. You can use a spreadsheet, which is what I do. Or there's all these apps out there that are 21st century. They do everything but make your lunch for you. So here's the biggest thing with a budgeting tool. I heard this at a conference years ago. It wasn't even a money conference, but I love this saying. Whatever tool you use, do not become a slave to the tool. If the tool's not working for you, don't use it. Now, if you're not executing, that's one thing, but if the tool is not working, get a different tool. I don't care which one we do. Now, again, I use a spreadsheet. At the end, you're going to get a survey, and please tell me all the good things I've done so I can make Brian happy. No, I'm kidding. But you're going to get a survey to complete. One of them on there is budget forms. If you want the very budget forms I use, I will give them to you for free, no cost. We're saying thank you for being here. Just make sure you put that in the survey. If you want an app, I've got several apps I can recommend. One is, and these are in no preferred order, YNAB. You may have heard, or You Need a Budget. You Need a Budget's a really good app. It can sync up if you want to your bank, and you can have what you're budgeting and what is actually happening lined up together. So You Need a Budget is a good app. I recommend that one. Dave Ramsey has an app called Every Dollar. I like that app because it syncs up with the baby steps. So if you want to follow the baby steps and the budget that goes with it, and they can also talk to your bank or credit union, that's fine too. A new app that I've learned of in the last year that, quite frankly, I'm kind of tempted to get just to try it because it's just kind of fun, is called Cube Money. And Cube is with a Q, Q-U-B-E money.com. It is way up on technology, and especially if you're married, it's got some really fun features. So you get a debit card from Cube that hooks up to your bank, the way it works, and you put spending limits on every category. And let's pretend you're going to get groceries for $800, or you have $800 in your Cube budget app, and it says $800 is the most you can spend. You've got $2,000 in the bank, you're fine, but you're going to spend $900 that day. You put the Cube card in, decline, because you said $800 was as much as you're going to spend. And if you're married and you override it, your spouse will know instantly. I'm like, this is kind of fun. And they've got kids' version of it I haven't played with yet. The other cool feature about Cube that I like, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything like this, everyone gets hacked now, right? Everything's been hacked, and then you got to rechange your card number with your subscriptions and all that. Well, what's really cool is when you use the Cube card, it scrambles the numbers. So if your Netflix card, the card that you use for Netflix gets compromised, you only have to put one new number in. Not have to restart the whole thing and give everyone your card number and yada, yada, yada. And they're continuing to come out with new improvements. So I'm really beginning to like Cube Money. So YNAB is a good one again. Every Dollar, Cube Money, if you're going to go app-based. Again, if you want a paper budget or Excel spreadsheet, let me know on my survey at the end, and I'll be sure to get that to you. But I love finding out from who I'm speaking to, because there's sometimes things I didn't know. Are there other budgeting tools you guys may be aware of I've not heard of that you guys have used successfully? There's always that word, right? Okay. Now, what we're talking about at the end of the day with budgeting is we want to be intentional. And I don't know if anyone here heard John Maxwell before? Huge John Maxwell fan on leadership. Now, it's not a video on budgeting, but here's a quick video from John about the importance of being intentional.
A life-changing experience for me back in 1973 as I'm sitting down with a guy named Kurt, and we're at the Holiday Inn in Lancaster, Ohio, and he asked me, he said, John, what's your plan for growth? I'm just a kid. I'm just in my 20s. I don't even know I'm supposed to have a plan for growth. I'm embarrassed because I don't have a plan for growth. And so I decided to fake it. So I told him how hard I worked. I went through this whole schedule, and I was like a plane circling the field, trying to come in for a landing. I went around and around and around. Finally, I ran out of gas and shut up and landed that sucker. And as soon as I quit, he looked at me, smiled. He said, you don't have a plan, do you? No. Then he said words that changed my life. He said, John, growth is not an automatic process. If you're going to grow, you're going to have to do so intentionally.
Intentionality is what we're talking about with a budget. So how can we use a budget effectively? Well, one of the areas you can do that is using cash. Turn in your workbook to page 12, please. One of the areas is using cash. And they first fill in the blank since our break here. Using cash will help us with impulse spending. Impulse spending. Now, due to time, I'm not going to do a 60-second clock, but I'm curious, even savers have impulse spendings. Where do you have an impulse spending? Raise your hand.
Candy at the gas station.
Candy at the gas station, yes. And by the way, can I say I'm excited? Your Casey's has the old logo. I love it. Sorry, none of our family likes the new Casey's logo. If you do, sorry. And so anytime we see a small town with an old Casey's logo, even our kids are like, yes, we like the old Casey's logo. So anyway, that got me thinking of that.
Might as well at the grocery store. While I'm here, I might as
While I'm here, yes. And they're usually just what, $5, $10, 10, whatever, not that much, right?
Lowe's, Menards.
Those box stores. I live like blocks away from one and not.
Flowers,
Oh,
garden stuff.
yeah, good stuff. So that is why I recommend using cash, not for everything, but for some things. I'm old school using the cash envelope system, but what's happened is some people have gotten the whole cash thing confused. I'm going to explain how it works in a minute. But here's the reason why we use cash. Studies have found when you spend with plastic, debit or credit card, you will spend on average 12 to 18% more, and some studies will say 24% plus. When you use cash, it neurologically registers as pain. In fact, I was doing this once at an audience, and the gal grabbed my money. I'm like, hey, I need that back, please. Thank you. This wasn't a gift. Anyway, but there's power in this. And a lady by the name of Rachel Cruz, she learned this. When you swipe with a card, see, back in the old days, especially with checks that everyone used to do in cash, there was an exchange of goods and services. I have to give you cash in exchange for a goods or service. Now you swipe and get the item. And psychologically, you'll spend more. And they know that. Target will give you up to 5% cash back on the Target card. Because they like you? No, they want your money. Because they know this works. I'll give someone $5 in exchange for 12 every time. And the number of times, I'll never forget, I talked to a guy, and he was actually doing very well off, but he still had a credit card and whatever. He's a personal friend. And I told him this is the average stat. And he says, you know what? I spend this much a month, and I probably overspend X amount a month. And I went back into the calculator, and a 17.99% was how much he was overspending monthly for convenience. And that's what this has been sold on. Now, obviously, if you have Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, any of those, if you send them cash, they're going to send it back. Not going to work. You're going to have a card. I have a debit card on my business. I have a debit card on my personal. And we'll talk about debit and credit cards at the very end. But we do use cash for a few things. Groceries, eating out, our personal spending money. In fact, when we went to buy, we live where there's an Aldi's, and you can do the online thing. You put you select your groceries, and then you go and they put the groceries in your vehicle. And when my wife decided to do that, I said, if you want, we can move groceries from cash to debit card, so that way we're not fooling around with cash because you're paying online. I'll never forget her answer. She goes, no, I still want to use cash because of what you just said. I know I'll get things, and over time, spending creep. And you've heard about spending creep, right? If you put a frog in boiling hot water, it jumps out. But if you put a frog in nice water and you trim up the thing slowly, you get frog legs for supper. And so she's like, nope. And so we have a grocery envelope. By the way, if you do groceries on envelope, here's a cash envelope hack. Have 2 grocery envelopes. Most people shop weekly for groceries. Not all, but most. When we had 1 grocery envelope, the first week, we got a lot of groceries. The second week, it got kind of bare in the cupboard. And so we have 2 envelopes. So that way we know this is week 1 and week 2. And that has really helped us with that. Gas for our cars, we use debit card because we're not overspending. Again, that's the purpose. Or what are the areas of impulse spending? Now, there's another way you can use cash, which we do. Some people use a savings account, and that's not wrong either. That's not your emergency fund. And that is saving up for the non-monthlies like Christmas, birthdays, et cetera, et cetera. So at home, we have an envelope system in our house in a safe place where we have our additional giving beyond our tithe, Christmas, birthday, sports activities, home repairs, car repairs, and we leave that in a safe spot. And then if a home repair comes up, then we go in the home repair envelope, and it keeps our spending under control. Now, is the cash system foolproof? No. You can cheat it. In fact, I almost did once. You mentioned box stores, so hopefully you like this story. I live literally, 4 minutes from a Lowe's and 7 minutes from Menards, so it's all right next to me. And where my office used to be, I came home late one night, and I knew everyone was going to be home for bed, and I drive by all the fast food restaurants. And as I'm driving by, and I'm hungry, and it's been a long day, and I'm going, ooh, I could eat that one, I could eat that one. I'm getting excited about getting to get some food. I go home to our eating envelope that had exactly 0 in it. And payday wasn't until Friday. But the home improvement envelope had some money in it. So I took a 20 out of that. Thought, 120 can't hurt. And right before I went out the door, I kind of felt convicted going, you're supposed to have iron in your food that you eat, but eating nails from Lowe's probably is not the way you're supposed to do that. And so I put the $20 bill back. And my wife earlier that night had made some pork chops. I warmed up the pork chops and went to bed. And I went to bed kind of in a bad mood. You ever been in a bad mood or something stupid and you wake up the next day going, really? I woke up the next day going, oh my gosh, that was a wonderful pork chop. But in that moment, I so bad wanted to eat out. So I could have cheated. I didn't. But what this does is like a speed bump to go, hey, are you sure? Are you sure you're going to do this? And there's no guilty feelings. So when we go out to eat, we just go out to eat, and we don't feel weird about it. If we want to go to the movies, we just go to the movies. We don't feel weird about it. So again, now, some of my clients, they only use cash in 1 or 2 areas. It might be food and eating out. Perfect. For others, they have 42 envelopes. Whatever works. But mainly use cash in areas of impulse spending. You don't want to be caught using plastic. John Maxwell, who we mentioned earlier, he talks about there's 4 types of people. One, there are cop-outs. Cop-outs, they're not even here. You guys are not cop-outs. I'm glad. Thanks for being here. Holdouts. If you want to win at money, do not be a holdout. A holdout looks like this. We're going to watch Pastor Brian. We'll see if he follows this. And if it works for him, then maybe I'll do it. Don't be a holdout. You also want to avoid being a dropout. You may leave today being encouraged and going, I want to get on a budget, I want to do these things, and then tomorrow wakes up and 2 tires go flat. No, you don't want to be a holdout. You want to be all out, both feet in, doing this. It is vital to be all in. You need to draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, life's too short to be broke. We work way too hard to not have any money left over at the end of the month. And this is a thing where you've got to be committed. In the book that's coming out in January that I've written, I call it the 5 phases from failure to freedom. Your first phase is awareness, getting aware of your situation. Then the next phase is knowledge, learning the best practices on whatever your subject matter is, in this case, money. But it's the 3rd phase that hangs us up. Commitment. Commitment. And when you make commitment and you are committed every month with your finances, you should see improvement. And as you see improvement, then you gain momentum, which is the 4th phase. And if you get momentum long enough, that leads you to the 5th phase of freedom. The problem is, that's not how life always works. And what I see people happen is they get aware and they get knowledge. And they commit with 1 leg, 1 foot, not both. And then they go through what I call the cycle of regret, where they begin to rationalize, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that. And the more you rationalize, the more you're rejecting what you learned in the knowledge phase. And as you rationalize more and more and more, you begin to feel despair, which then makes you feel like a failure and you quit. And that's what I call a cycle of regret. And you can break that. We're going to talk about that later. But if you want to break the cycle of regret, you have to commit. All line in the sand. Last story here, then we're going to go to break in a moment. First break. The Andersons, this is a coaching client of one of my friends who's also a financial coach. They came to a financial coach because for 13 years they've been married and nothing but stress financially. Average 2 overdrafts a month. And in today's $30 to $35 overdraft world, in 13 years of $2 a month, that'd be over $1,000 just in overdraft fees. Couldn't sleep, marriage strain, unclear goals. They wanted to pay off $30,000 in debt, but they didn't think it was possible. So they got a coach. And after looking at the budget and they made some adjustments to things, okay, we can get you out of debt in 7 years just by making a few changes. But if you could do more, we could do better. And in the first 4 weeks, they stopped overdrafting. 6 weeks later, they got the $1,000 emergency fund. And they paid off $30,000 in debt, not in 7 years, but 15 months. Because they had a strong why, they were committed to their goals, and they were willing to be held accountable, which breaks the cycle of regret. So where are they today? They have no overdrafts, only check the bank account once in a while just to see how their savings is growing, and they're getting along with their finances. So what we're saying at the end of the day, if you want to be like the Andersons, is you need to have behavior change. And if you have the right behavior change, you're going to look like that guy, maybe minus the goofy glasses and just lots of money like that. I don't know, maybe you will. What I don't want to happen from this conference is you learn some material or get regained, refocused, realigned, and look like that person in 2 weeks. That's why commitment is so critical, especially in changing your behaviors. But it's even more than changing your behaviors. It's what principles are you going to have? Because it's the principles that keep us from changing our behaviors to and fro. Think about this. The top 3 New Year's resolutions is lose weight, quit smoking, and get out of debt. Why is it 3 weeks later we're eating a Twinkie, smoking a cigarette, finance on a credit card? One time I was at a church, I said it wrong and said it fast, and I accidentally said smoke a Twinkie. It gets worse. The person on the front row, I'm not making it up, raised his hand and said, I tried that once. You tried to smoke a Twinkie? What were you smoking to make you think smoking a Twinkie was, and he said it didn't work. I'm like, Anyway, still just floors me to this day, smoking a Twinkie. But anyway, but how many people, and especially again, now a city slicker that I am now, while we have all these gyms and everything, you ask any gym owner, first 3 weeks in January, packed. Not by February. And so the regular gym members, they hate January because we got to get through the people who won't come back. They had the right behaviors, but they didn't change the principles by which they believed in, so the behaviors didn't stick. And that's why the behavior or the principles are so vital. So remember at the very beginning of our time today, we talked about what is your why. When the why is strong enough, the how will happen. Saying I heard years ago was this: no one is going to be more motivated about your situation than you. So if not you, then who? If not now, then when? No one's going to do it for you. And don't wait for the raise or for the uncle you never knew that had $1 million that he was going to bequeath you. Today, make today the day you draw a line in the sand and go, enough. It's time to be a better steward of God's resources. God's got a lot of forgiveness and grace, but let's get on it. Let's do it. Turn to the next page. We got one more little 60-second exercise and we're going to take a break. I want you to write down, based on what you learned or relearned in these last 90 minutes, what commitments are you willing to make? For some of you, it might go, I'm going to go home and really find out what my expenses are. Or maybe I'm going to retry the cash system. Or maybe I'm going to find an accountability partner or have a meeting with my spouse. Write down 3 things you're going to commit to because of what you learned today so far. Go. And then once you've written down your 3 commitments, circle the one that you absolutely is going to be your top priority. If you only have one of the 3, what is the priority you're going to focus on as soon as we're done today. So in quick summary, we talked about the emergency fund. Again, baby step one, $1,000. Once you get out of debt, we're going to do a 3 to 6 months emergency fund. Remember the 4 keys of budgeting. We're going to update it, balance it, discuss it, and live it. And budgeting is going to be a way of life for the rest of our lives. And then we're going to use cash as our way of holding ourselves accountable with impulse spending. The time is now 10:37. We're a little long. Real quick, any questions on budgeting or cash envelope before we take our first break? And I will stay up here for questions that you'd rather ask one-on-one versus the group.
This is kind of related to both the emergency fund and budgeting, but as far as methods for building up that emergency fund, is there a strategy that you've seen that's more successful at? Let's pretend your emergency, not your step 1, but your step 3, your emergency fund, say $15,000 or $20,000. Methods of getting to that point, what have you seen that's been really successful? For instance, automatic $30 a week gets pulled from account A to your emergency account B, like it's subliminal, like it automatically happens, or intentional, all right, I've checked my financials at the end of the month and I'm going to put $200 towards that.
That's a great question. I love that. And I'm actually going to reframe part of it. So when I work with clients that are on baby step 1 or 2, or excuse me, just 1, they'll do that method of take X amount of my paycheck, put it over there. I've almost never seen that work. There maybe have, but at least my clients, that doesn't work. So the intentionality piece, what I've learned is the best is a set a goal. Going, okay, I'm at, let's say you just got to baby step 3, you got $1,000, you want to get to 15, we got 14 to go. Is it going to be 6 months, a year, 18 months? And I would do, and I did not talk about this earlier, I would do what I call a mock budget. Anytime we got a goal or we're going to change, like you're going to change jobs, change where you live, change a major expense or income, do a mock budget and go, okay, could we afford $500 a month to go to an emergency fund or $1,000 a month to go to the emergency fund? For most people, when we got out of debt, we could go pretty quickly because when we got our debt paid off, we used that debt, all that money going to debt simply right away went there. So I recommend intentionality. And then you're still living on, Dave calls beans and rice. I mean, we're still living pretty scorched earth. But for most people, baby step 3 is a 6 to 12 month exercise. Other than that, the other way to do it is going, do I have an asset I can sell that I really don't need to get there more quickly? But I would say intentionality is a lot better than the automatic withdrawal. With that said, the other part with that, I would recommend any budget that you use, like my budget spreadsheet, one of the reasons why I like it is it doesn't just balance the month, it balances each paycheck. And so let's pretend, what I've learned is when everyone tries to make it all nice and neat, like it's the same every week for groceries and the same every week for gas, when you start playing the balanced budget game, you'll find it's not that pretty. You can't be that exact. So, like your extra money left over, if say you get paid weekly, you might have $202 that week left over. The next week you got $40 left over. The next week you got $802 left over. What I recommend doing is when you get paid, whatever you have left over to go to emergency fund, right then, treat it like a bill, pay it. And then the next one, boom, boom, boom. Because what some people will do is go, well, hey, I'll just save it up at the beginning, and the end of the month, all that money together, then I'll dump it. No, you won't. You're going to go, ooh, that $1,000 extra in the checkbook feels kind of nice. I kind of missed a pizza. I think I might get a pizza and an Amazon purchase while I'm here. So I just recommend the moment you get paid, if you've got a goal for the emergency fund, just take that money, right, whatever the extra is that you budgeted that week or pay period, and put it right to the emergency fund. Good question. Other questions? Time is now 10:40. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. Go to the restroom if you need to. Get some refreshments. I think we got wonderful homemade cookies and chips and water. And is there some coffee still left over back there? Good on coffee. And I'll stay up here if you've got questions before we head to the next one. Thanks.